Hello, hello, hello. My name is Bright Rose, and today we are going to be going through the process that I like to use when I'm doing a little bit of terraforming, a little bit of cliff building, things like that in Minecraft, because terraforming is one of my favorite things to do in this game. I like to remake the world just to add little bits here and there to enhance the natural generation of the landscape in Minecraft. So what we're going to be looking at is a little cliff where I'm going to change this bit of dirt and grass here, and maybe we're going to get on and we're going to try one of the bigger cliffs on this mountain behind us. And I'm just going to talk you through what I do when I'm laying out the beginnings of the cliff, the little bits of detail that I add here and there, and how I like to just improve things a little bit. Of course, this is my own opinion, this is how I like to do things, so it's by no means a 100% tutorial and you should totally do this, because we all have different aesthetics, we all have things that we like and we don't like, and this is what I like to do. When I've got an area that I want to work on, I like to just prep the area to begin with, getting rid of all the little bits that might get in the way, so you have what is basically a clean canvas, and smashing all of the plants and the grass and things like that is a very easy way to be able to clear out an area and just get a good look at what you're working with. And of course, I am on creative because, it's a lot easier to do this. So I'm just going to fill in bits like this so we don't have random holes everywhere that we can fall into. And like I say, it just creates that clean canvas for you to be able to work on. As with many things in Minecraft, the basis is going to be stone, and that's what we're going to work with, just to set out the bottom layer and work on the outline of where we want the cliff to be, following the natural generation of the land round here, just by placing a few stone blocks to get the idea of what we want to do. So quite simply, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the natural generation of the cliff like this, and occasionally I'm going to bump it out a little bit, and we're just going to add the bottom layer of stone. There's no particular way that I'm going to do this, it's just to get a rough idea of where we want the cliff to be, how big we want it to be, and just to get the outline. Once we've got the basic outline at the foot of what will be the cliff, we can start adding more blocks into the different layers above, and we can start making the curve of the cliff that we're looking for, and we can decide whether we want it to be steeper or just a more gradual curve as it goes up. With this case, what I think I'm going to be going for is a kind of little rocky outcropping on the edge of this little hill. So it's not going to be a severe cliff, it's not going to be huge, it's just going to be a nice little feature that breaks up the grass and the dirt of the general area of this mountainside to just give it a little bit more interest as we're looking around the area. One thing that's quite important as we are placing blocks down is the order of placement in terms of what blocks should go above and below each other. And the easiest way to do that is to generally look around at the natural generation of the blocks. So you can see on this big cliff behind me, we have these areas where there is stone at the very bottom, then there's dirt, and then there's grass. So when you're placing blocks, it's a good idea to try and aim for having this sort of generation. So you're looking to have this order of stone on the bottom, then dirt, then grass on top, and not have a situation where you're placing something like a stone block on top of a grass block or a dirt block. It just makes it look a little bit more natural and works with the natural generation of the landscape in Minecraft. You can see what I've done here is I've got these grass blocks sticking out of the stone blocks, but in this case what you can imagine is this little area here has had a bit more grass that's able to take root and grow on this area. It's not directly under a stone block. However, there are stone blocks above it in the layer, but there's not one on top of it. So it just adds a little bit more detail to make it look like the grass has been able to catch on and grow down these areas. But this that we've got so far is just the very basic setup. It's just using the normal stone blocks to add a little bit more on here. And what we can do now is we can go in and we can start adding some detail to make it look even better. The simplest and easiest ways to start adding a little bit more detail in is just to begin expanding the base of the area. So we can take out some of these grass blocks at the foot of the cliff and we can start adding in these stone blocks. So it doesn't just stop where it meets what is the level of the ground, and the stone continues on like this. So we're not going to add too many, we're just going to have a little bit here and there, just where rock may have fallen from the top of the cliff, or the grass hasn't quite managed to grow up to the edge of the rocks yet. So that's what we're going for. Also, around these edges, we can begin to blend the stone in to the existing terrain. So we just get little bits like this where it's pushing on outwards. And if you wanted to, you can just add a bit more where maybe the stone extends a little bit further like that. Of course, as you can add stone at the bottom, you can also add it at the top. So it doesn't just stop as the cliff gets to the top of the ridge. So you can just add a little bit more in like this to show where the grass has grown over the top of the rock, but hasn't really extended any further. So it just looks better. It looks a bit more natural, like that. The next step we can go for is adding some slabs and stairs into this. So in these areas, we can sort of soften the curve of the bottom of the cliff, so you make it look a little bit gentler. And on bits like this, you can add, say, a slab in like this, where it's surrounded by other rocks, and it just makes it a nice, more gradual curve. And stairs do this as well, even better, and you can place them at different angles, and you just get this more interesting feature. So the harsher lines of the cliffs can begin to be smoothed out and just look a little bit more natural, and ultimately, although this is very difficult in Minecraft, make it look that little bit less blocky. One thing I like to do at the top of these cliffs is add like a little lip where maybe the cliff goes up and there's just this little bump like this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to edge it off with these little bits of stone going around here, and again adding some flat stone at the same level as the top here. It just gives a little bit more texture to the cliff as a whole, and I think it makes it look better. Now that we've added in the stone slabs and stairs, we're beginning to get a much more angular but at the same time smoother curve to the cliff as we move away from the 1x1 meter blocks and we start getting the half slabs and things like that in. And I think it just makes it look a little bit more natural, a little bit more better aesthetic as you're looking at it. What we move on to next is we start adding a few more subtle colours and textures in there. So we can add some light, we can add some shade, things like that. And what we're going to be doing is looking for little bits of the cliff where we can add these things in. And what I'm going to use is some tuff for shading and some andesite, both the polished and the normal variety, to add little highlights in across the cliff. So we're going to start looking for these areas where we can add these in. For the highlights with their andesite, we're looking for areas like this, where we can just add a little bit of highlight to a ridge like this, or on the top of here, so we can just knock those blocks off and replace them with the lighter ones. So it just adds that little highlight to that edge, and you can go over the whole build, just knocking bits off, adding the lighter coloured blocks in, and it just gives it that little bit more detail that enhances the overall look. Once you've added in the normal andesite bits across the cliff, you can start adding in bits of polished andesite. And I use these a lot more sparingly because they are a bit brighter, they do stand out more, and they're the really highlighted points. So I just like to add a couple in across the build so that they can just grab the eye as you're looking over the build, such as in little areas where you can draw in people's attention. Adding in the shading can be a little bit more difficult because what I like to do is add it into blocks that aren't fully visible. So what you're looking for is ones like this where only half of the block is visible. So what you're going to want to do, take that out and just replace it with your shadowy block. You don't want to put too much in, just here and there where you can think it will enhance the build just by adding bits in. So you're looking for any half block or potentially quarter block that is visible throughout the build where you want to be able to add them. Now that we've got the shading added in, we can look to begin to add some little bits more variations of colour. And what I like to add in is little bits of mossy cobblestone or cobblestone around the base of the cliff. Areas that are perhaps becoming overgrown, or maybe they're wet and they've got water running around them. So you can just begin to add a little bit of blending between the grass and the stone. And sometimes if you want to, you can run up, you can replace some of these slabs with little mossy areas where again maybe the grass or the dirt is beginning to take and it hasn't quite fully grassed over yet. It just adds these little pops of colour, and again it makes it look a little bit more natural. Your cobblestone also serves, much like the andesite, to add some highlighted areas. So maybe you can replace some little bits, especially around where the mossy cobblestone is, just to add some bright highlights around. Be a bit sparing with it. It can be quite an overbearing block, especially when you've got a more similar plain coloured palette around it. But it can just add in these brighter areas to make bits stand out. Now that we're pretty much complete with the stonework, we can start adding in little bits of dirt and things like that around the base or maybe around the top, just to have it completely blend in. So what I like to do is just with the stone, remove some of these blocks around the base and just replace them with, in this case, coarse dirt, but also occasionally I like added in little bits of rooted dirt, just a bit of a brighter texture at the bottom. And you can do this in these areas where maybe the grass is just beginning to take on the lower areas and it's just a little bit more eroded or things like that. So blend them in together so you get little variations of colour like that. You can also use podzol, but podzol is a much darker block that will stand out. So maybe I'll get rid of this coarse dirt that I've got here and replace it with a bit of podzol just to create a much muddier, darker area. And you can look for little areas like that around the build where you can add these things in. Now that we've got little areas of dirt added in, we can come to start adding a little bit of vegetation and things like that and replace the grass and things like that we broke at the start. And of course the easiest way to do this is just by grabbing yourself some bone meal and clicking it in the areas around this. But then you spend, as you always do when you are terraforming and using bone meal like this, breaking away all of the flowers and a lot of the grass that have now covered the area. Talk to any terraformer and they will tell you how much time they spend breaking grass, breaking flowers and things like that, just simply because they stand out so much. And a lot of time is spent just standing back, looking at the various bits of grass that have appeared and deciding, do you really want that there? Do I want these flowers? They're very bright, they stand out quite a lot. Do I want this many thick clumps of grass in this particular area? No, I probably don't. Let's smash them all and get rid of them. And that's the sort of thing you're doing. one thing that I also like to add, because it adds a little bit of height variation, a little bit of colour difference, is using the ferns and the large ferns. But again, this comes down to what your build is and what you are wanting to add. Also, it can very much depend on the biome that you are building in. I'm of course in the plains biome just because it is the simplest, most common area, but you can tailor it to what your build is. So I just go around, add a couple of ferns. They just add a little bit of a darker colour in the area. Also, the larger ones, again, if they stand out, they add a little bit of interest, and you can just dot them around. And overall, it looks nice, it looks overgrown, it looks a lot more natural. So this is the end result of just these simple little things to enhance the natural generation of the world, to add in a little natural rock feature at the base of this area. And what I like doing is adding these in. You can add them around water as well to make little cliffs and things like that. And these same techniques are repeatable on a much bigger scale as well. So there's no reason that you can't do this sort of thing with a much bigger area. The only difference being you can add in a few more darker tones, a few bigger areas of highlighting and things like that, and you can get some more interesting shapes and things going on with a bigger cliff. But you know what? I think we'll cover that in another video. So this is what I like doing. I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Bright Rose, and I'll see you again in another Remaking the World video. Bye bye.